Rod D. Martin. He's the founder and CEO of Martin Capital. He's a technology entrepreneur, investor, and futurist. He's from Destin, Florida. Fox Business calls him a tech guru. Gawker once labeled him a brilliant nonconformist, while Britain's Guardian describes him as a philosopher capitalist. Blaze TV has named him one of America's leading public intellectuals. I think that's me. I called him that. He's a friend. I just call him my friend Rod Martin. He was part of the PayPal pre-IPO startup team, serving as a special counsel to founder and CEO Peter Thiel, and also served as a policy director to former Governor Mike Huckabee. Rod and I have been friends for over 2 decades, and I'm pleased that he's back in the economic war room. Welcome back, Rod.
Great to be here.
You know, your experience, life experience, we'll be talking casually, and you'll say, well, when we were founding PayPal or when we sold to eBay or whatever, hey, I know in that experience there was this guy, what was his name? He's South African kind of obscure guy. What was it? Oh, Elon Musk. You did a few dealings with him, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And great man. He has greatly exceeded his already shocking degree of promise. In his 20s, he and his brother started a software company that they sold for, I think it was 52 million or 54 million, something like that. And he owned half of it. And then he founded X, which merged with PayPal very early. And he was CEO of PayPal for a little while. And then, he started SpaceX before he even had the money from the sale of PayPal. It's an amazing story how he taught himself rocket engineering and, hired a tutor, but he's self-taught and he's one of the genius innovators in the area of all time. And around the same time, he was the early investor in Tesla. And then after a shakeout, he ends up, he was a co-founder, but now he's founder and CEO. And how do you do 2 amazing things at the same time? But he has, and then, throw in making robots and making brain chips. And I don't really want a brain chip, but it looks like the brain chip is going to make it possible for quadriplegics to walk. So, these are amazing humanitarian ventures. And when he says that 1 million people are going to be living and working in space by late mid-century, he may be being conservative. The implications of Starship are just much, much greater than anybody.
We'll get into all of that, but I want to talk with you about his role with the Trump administration. I want to talk to you about a whole host of Trump initiatives: DOGE, USAID, Panama, Greenland tariffs, Stargate, China, plans for a sovereign wealth fund. Let's start with Elon Musk and DOGE. Maybe the most significant thing he's doing of all the things you named is literally taking this criminal enterprise that's found itself as a cancer inside our government and ripping it out. Tell us what you know about DOGE.
Well, no one really believed, I don't think, that Donald Trump, not so much that he would, but that he could actually take out the deep state, because you're going to need this legislation passed, and you're going to need that procedure, and you're going to have those court challenges. And he's just going and doing it. He's flooding the zone. He's doing it in the way that the Democrats do the crazy unconstitutional things that they do. He is using legitimate executive power very carefully. These EOs are very carefully worded. They have their act together and they're just laying waste. Okay, I can't fire an individual non-political appointee unless I have cause. Okay, he's just firing them all. You can do that. You can actually have force reductions. You can actually move agencies to other cities so everybody ends up quitting. You can actually give them buyouts. I don't know if you saw, but yesterday, CIA offered its entire staff a buyout, the entire CIA. Are they all going to take it? Of course not, but everybody who takes it is to the good. And so, Elon goes in and looks at this executive order created agency, USAID. And it is emblematic of the rest. We could talk about the rest for much more time than you have, but USAID has a budget larger than the CIA and the State Department put together. It is huge, and it's absolutely unaccountable. It is supposed to be part of the State Department. It hasn't been for decades, and it doesn't answer to anybody. And Joni Ernst was talking about that. Her committee tried to investigate him, and they simply wouldn't respond at all. And they literally told her, they threatened her, but the U.S. senator, but also they told her flat out, we are a charitable entity. We don't have to answer to you or anybody in the executive branch. No, that's not the law. That's not the Constitution. Article 2, Section 1 is very clear. The executive power of the United States shall be vested in the president. The entire executive branch has to be accountable to free elections held regularly. And we just had one. We were just told how democracy was on the ballot. Well, that's true. The left was eviscerating democracy, and Donald Trump is restoring it. So anyway, Elon went through, found all this waste and fraud, but it's much worse than that. USAID has been overthrowing governments. USAID has been pushing all kinds of transgender propaganda throughout the third world. But USAID's done worse than that. They've been propping up Politico with $8 million. We just found out almost $2 million to the relatively tiny Christianity Today, just flat out buying evangelical leaders to push Biden's agenda. It just gets worse every day. So this is an absolute maggot pile of corruption, and it is the slush fund for the deep state, and now it's gone.
Yeah, well, and people like George Soros, people are complaining about these unelected people that have been involved in government. What about George Soros and his son, who've been not only hidden inside government, but they've been taking money from these agencies, for their work? I think the Clintons got $80-some million or something written as a check to Chelsea Clinton and the Clinton Foundation or something. I mean, this is so egregious. What's the worst thing that you've seen so far from your perspective?
I would say the $200 million that went to support ISIS. I would say the forced sterilizations of 300,000 Native women in Peru, but the subversion of the U.S. media, the actual buying of media outlets in this country to affect the outcome of an election. We were told for years, Russia, election interference is the worst thing that could ever happen. They are doing it with your money.
And we've caught them. Elon Musk is ripping it out, we hope. We got to pray for that man. We'll be right back after a break. More with Rod Martin. In uncertain times, finding stability in the economy can feel challenging. But what if you could navigate economic volatility while honoring your biblical values? At Timothy Plan, they believe this balance is possible. Timothy Plan filters its volatility-weighted ETFs and family of mutual funds through a biblical pro-life and pro-family lens, so you can see competitive returns and moral responsibility, helping you to weather the economic storms. With Timothy Plan, align your investments with your values while adapting to our ever-changing culture. Since 1994, Timothy Plan has been recognized leader in biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, your bridge between faith, finances, and the future. Visit timothyplan.com or call 1-800-TIM-PLAN or 1-800-846-7526. Investing includes risk, including possible loss of principal. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com.
Somewhere a perversion has taken place. Our natural unalienable rights are now considered to be a dispensation of government, and freedom has never been so fragile, so close to slipping from our grasp as it is at this moment.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. It has to be fought for and defended by each generation.
You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
In this most critical time in our nation's history, now more than ever, Americans need to align with companies that support our constitutional rights and God-given freedoms. Patriot Mobile supports your values and provides exceptional 100% U.S.-based customer service. Join the movement today. Go to patriotmobile.com or call 972-PATRIOT.
We've been speaking with my friend, the great Rod Martin. He's a terrific guy. He's got an amazing Substack. You can find it at rodmartin.org. And every day there's something new in my inbox that's informative, it's enlightening, it's powerful, it's excellent. And I've watched him as his followers have exploded because people really want to know what Rod Martin is thinking on all of these great topics. We just covered Doge and the deep state. Now I want to talk about Trump's international policies. Greenland, which people were laughing at about a month ago, Rod came out and said, hey, don't laugh. And not only that, it seems like the people of Greenland would like this. Can you explain why Donald Trump is fascinating on this tiny little country known as Greenland?
Well, Greenland, of course, isn't tiny. It's the size of the Louisiana Purchase. It's bigger than Alaska. It's bigger than Texas and
Alaska. But in
Alaska.
population, it's tiny.
But it's only 57,000 people. That's exactly right. I grew up in a town of 20,000 in Arkansas, and this place is just barely bigger than that. So what's it good for? Well, we have significant bases there and have for decades because Greenland is the outer end of what we call the Greenland-Iceland-UK gap. It is some of the most important oceanic real estate that exists because the Russians don't have a way to get their navy out of St. Petersburg and the Baltic. They don't have a way to get their navy out of the Black Sea. They can't even really keep a navy in the Black Sea because the Ukrainians keep blowing up all their ships with drones. It's a joke. They're bottled up at Vladivostok behind Japan. So their one way to get out and attack Atlantic shipping, which would be essential if they invaded Europe, because America has to move its army from North America to Europe by ship. And this is called Operation Reforger. It's a 2-week process. And if the Russian Navy can get out there and blow up the ships in the water, it could overrun Europe, or at least that was the theory in the Cold War. I don't think they can even get to Kiev now, much less Berlin, but that's the threat that we're defending against. That's what NATO is allegedly for. So the most important thing you have to be able to control is that Greenland, Iceland, UK gap, and Greenland, of course, is key. In addition, tons of natural resources. People have no idea. And Denmark has no capacity to develop it. They don't have the technology. They don't have the money. They don't have the personnel. It would have to come from either us or China. And that's the real threat. If China gets control of that, it deteriorates our strategic position. It also gives them their economy a huge shot in the arm. It also puts them in a place which is much closer to the United States than anything else they could possibly have. So it's a real danger. Denmark can't handle the territory. We can make those guys a deal where they will fall all over themselves to come. And as you know, there was recently a poll, 57% of Greenlanders said they wanted to be part of the United States. And the younger you are, the more you wanted to.
Yeah, and that's amazing, because if they could be another Puerto Rico and be like tax exempt or have some special benefits and treatment and citizenship, it'd be an amazing thing. All right, so Trump is not, they said, oh, what a crazy man he is to talk about Greenland. He's actually a brilliant man to talk about Greenland, and that is to handle the Atlantic. But what about the Panama Canal issue? I mean, I think he's brilliant here as well, and he had a big win there, at least according to what I read at rodmartin.org.
Well, in point of fact, the Panama Canal is what our last territorial purchase from Denmark was about. We bought the Danish Virgin Islands in 1917 under Woodrow Wilson to protect the approaches to the brand new Panama Canal. The canal is absolutely essential for U.S. economic security as well as national security. It's just extraordinary what enormous percentage of our shipping flows through that very narrow place. And if you wanted to be able to defend Taiwan, it would require ships from the Atlantic coming through the canal to be deployed over to the Taiwan Strait or close environs. So you have to have the canal. And the Chinese actually control both ends of the canal. They control the infrastructure of the canal. they've bought off basically the entirety of the leadership of Panama. It's extraordinary. And I wrote an article on this yesterday. This has to be countered. And it's because successive administrations in the United States have fallen asleep at the switch. They need investment. They need help. We can provide it. It ain't no big deal. My goodness, there's a Trump Tower in Panama City, for heaven's sake. I don't think it's named that anymore, but it used to be. And there's no reason for us not to be a better patron for them. But they have to actually give us security in the canal. They have to actually kick the Chinese out. And Rubio got their president to agree to that in one meeting. So all these liberal pundits who say, oh, this is crazy. No, it's not. We got it done in a meeting. And if they will live up to their treaty obligations, we don't need ownership of the canal.
No, that's phenomenal. And Marco Rubio, Senator Rubio, I mean, he is walking with a big Trump behind him. He's speaking softly and carrying a big Trump, essentially, because that power, that frightening awareness around the world that Donald Trump is a man of action and going to do the things that he says he's going to do. I mean, we see him in Doge. He's ripping the government out. We undermined him, unfortunately. Our government, I don't mean we, you, Rod Martin, and Kevin Freeman. I certainly don't mean the American people, but he was undermined in his first administration by his own administration, by the Congress, by the media, and so forth. Now he's going straight after them. Not only that, he's going after the media, which has gotten all of this largesse from our U.S. government, which is a house of cards. So I just think the Trump effect is so powerful. And I'll tell you, who must be most frightened would be the Chinese. Talk to us just for a minute about tariffs.
Well, the Chinese are not unaware that this guy is completely unafraid. What are you going to do to Donald Trump? Impeach him?
Shoot him.
Oh, you
right? They shot at him and he survived.
You're going to arrest him? I mean, what are you going to do? And they've done it all. So he feels completely fearless and empowered. And that's exactly the point of the tariff threats. That's how he brought Canada and Mexico to heel, again, in one phone call. The threat plus one phone call. The aim is not to put huge tariffs on them. The aim is to get them to act in fairness toward us. Defend the border, keep the fentanyl out, be a good ally. And same thing for China. I mean, we don't want to cripple the Chinese economy. It's doing that for itself. We want them to treat us more fairly, and we'll see how that plays out.
All right, we're going to have to take another break. When we come back, let's talk about the future now. We see what Trump has done in the past and present. Let's talk about the future, and China has a big role in that. We'll be right back with Rod Martin. Here's a $10 bill. It's got the picture of Alexander Hamilton on the front of it. You know, it's kind of sad. When I was 10 years old, everything that I could buy for $1 now costs about $10. That's the cost of inflation. It's just paper. It's not backed by anything. You can't exchange it for gold and silver. You used to, but you can't do that anymore. And that's unfortunate. You know, pirates wouldn't accept this. Pirates, they wanted gold and silver. Patriots, the founders of this nation, also wanted gold and silver coin. In fact, they put a provision in the Constitution, 17 words, that said states could only make gold and silver coins tender within the states. That's why I wrote this new book, Pirate Money, Discovering the Founders' Hidden Plan for Economic Justice and Defeating the Great Reset. It will explain exactly the history of money and exactly why gold and silver coins can be made modern with new technology and a useful monetary system. PirateMoneyBook.com. We're talking with our friend Rod Martin. You can find him at rodmartin.org. Read his Substack. It's brilliant. I get it. You know, whenever an article comes out, I stop everything just to read that because he's got brilliant insight. And he put one out, for example, on AI, right? AI, as we know it today, he said the same thing that our friend Dr. Phil Parker said. It's essentially a calculator. And 20 years from now, we're going to look at the current AI that we fear so much and what DeepSeek has done, and we're going to look back and we're going to say, oh, wow, that was a pocket calculator. Yet, it is the future in so many ways. So I want to talk with you, Rod, about the Stargate initiative. I want to talk to you about DeepSeek. I want to talk to you about the Bitcoin Reserve, American Sovereign Wealth Fund. You know, Trump is remaking everything going forward in all of these areas. And of course, space, which is one of your favorite topics. But let's start with China. The China future is not guaranteed. They have a demographic problem, they have an economic problem, and now they have a Trump problem. What do you see happening in China?
Well, first, they are toast. I mean, there's no escaping their fate. Their birth rate has been super low now for decades for their own, entirely their own fault through the one-child policy. They have probably right about 120 million fewer working age people than they're claiming in their official data. That number is dropping fast. The UN suggests their population will probably drop in half by the end of the century. But even the UN's numbers suggest the outlier possibility that they could get down to a slightly smaller population than that of the United States. Nothing to compare to that historically. That's shocking. This is a nation that has put all of its savings into real estate, and real estate is in free fall. That bubble makes ours look like nothing. But it's worse than that. You can't rent condos when there aren't people. And this is their problem across the board. So robotics might help them, AI might help them, but robots don't buy cars and don't buy houses, so there's a limit.
A change of political regime would help them. If you yank the CCP out and you give them a Trump-like effect of positive looking forward and so forth, that's what China needs. There's a brilliant Christian movement inside China, but we're going to need to see some dramatic changes in the government. All right, let's talk about DeepSeek. They announced that they've got this new AI, and you know, it destroyed our market for one day, destroyed NVIDIA for one day, but now we see the market recovering, and your perspective and Phil Parker's perspective is, hey, look, that's the natural evolution of things. It's going to get cheaper, and that doesn't mean that we're not going to see continued growth. Should we be doing an American sovereign wealth fund and investing in that technology like the Stargate Initiative? How would you go about it, Rod?
Well, first, as far as AI, you're right. It's a fancy calculator. George Gilder makes this point better than anybody when he says that computation is not comprehension. We are still subject to garbage in, garbage out. And that's what a large language model is. It takes in a huge amount of data and processes it really brilliantly, but it's only operating on what you give it, on what it finds somewhere. One of the problems with some of the LLMs right now is that they're starting to use AI-generated text. And so that just messes the whole thing up. AI is not creative. It may give the illusion of creativity, but it is not creative. It is very much what von Neumann and all those guys were talking about in the early part of the 20th century, that you have to have an outside oracle. The system cannot generate its own creativity. And that's true in microcomputers. It's true in mainframes. It's certainly true in AI. So yeah, the price is going to keep coming down. What they've done with DeepSeek is quite impressive, I think. It probably isn't everything they're claiming, but it doesn't matter. They're pointing the direction. That's going to make it a lot cheaper to do AI. In the short term, I understand the hit on NVIDIA's stock, but in the long term, I'd buy NVIDIA. I'd buy it while it's down right now. You're going to need a lot more NVIDIA chips to do all the AI that the lower cost is going to enable, and it's going to enable a lot. I would add this. There have been estimates that suggest that AI could increase productivity of every industrialized nation tenfold in the next 10 to 15 years. That would be a revolution. That would be bigger and quicker than the Industrial Revolution. And the article that I published, as you know, that I wrote, is about the fact that despite that, while it may be a technological revolution, its implementation in the economy, like tractors, like light bulbs, tends to be an evolution. So there's plenty of time for people to adjust to new jobs if any jobs are destroyed. And the people who are in their current jobs who are able to stay will be vastly better at their jobs because they have this tool.
All right, so that's brilliant. I agree with that. Let's talk now. Should we have a sovereign wealth fund? Should the government be investing in these things? Should we have a Bitcoin reserve? And what do you see in space? You got a minute and a half.
I think we should have a Bitcoin reserve. I think that's smart. We need the kind of regulatory regime for both crypto and AI that David Sachs is talking about. David was another one of our PayPal guys. He was chief operating officer and, just an amazing guy. And he is Trump's new AI and crypto czar. So he's going to bring some really positive change. And I think crypto is going to explode, but not just crypto, blockchain as a whole. Think of blockchain as the operating system. Crypto is just an app. And that whole area is going to get a lot bigger once you have sensible regulatory framework, and you're about to get it. I think a sovereign wealth fund is a really bad idea. I don't think government invests well ever, and I think we saw that under Obama with Solyndra. It's just always a disaster, and no matter how you start out, it always ends poorly. Trump may do it great, but whoever his successor is, Republican or Democrat, is eventually going to screw it up. And that's really what we saw with the Nixon-Kissinger foreign policy. They had a foreign policy that was so brilliant because they were so brilliant. And then you get Ford and Carter, and they just completely screw it up because, I'm sorry, those guys just weren't that smart. And that would be the problem here. So, no, I think a sovereign wealth fund's a terrible idea, even if it comes from somebody I like.
All right, we're going to have to bring you back to talk about space. We'll have to have a whole show on space, but excellent commentary. We so appreciate you, and thank you for the incredible insights. You can learn more at rodmartin.org. It's always great to see you. We're going to summarize all this in our free economic battle plan. You can get a copy at economicwarroom.com. Remember, what we see as a marketplace, our enemies, they view it as a battle space. This is Kevin Freeman from the Economic War Room.